Okay, hello everyone. Well, this is a very short tutorial dealing with a very precise situation that is exporting footstep assets to use on a multi-instrument in fmod. So first thing I did was go to freesound.org and downloaded some footsteps of two kinds. These are interior footsteps and some exterior boots on dirt footsteps. Okay, let's make sound assets from this file by chopping samples into units. To do that, we're going to zoom in. Well, first of all, using Shift and the arrow keys, you can change the vertical zoom of the waveform, so you can make sure that nothing is missing when you're editing. Push your Shift and up arrow. Also make sure your snap option in Reaper is disabled. As you can see, I cannot click here because this little area that I want to chop is outside of my snap default. So I'm going to remove this for now and make sure that every cut is in the beginning of the footstep. For now, I'm going to just do a bit of a human batch file here and just cut these footsteps like so. One more here, one more here. Make sure you zoom in well so that you don't miss the attack of the sound. This is next. One here. Okay, one more. This is a set of 10 footsteps. You can use as many as you like. Okay, that was it. So now we have different files. We could actually just render them as they are, but you notice that they have different lengths, and that could be a problem when we start transposing this file and playing around with its attributes. So to avoid this offset and the situation where we are transposing, changing the pitch of the file, and we have different results on different assets that could lead to footsteps sounding like maybe a different character footstep with a different weight. We're going to make sure that they all these files have the same length. So I'm going to, as you see, I can drag them, and as I drag them below, Reaper will create a new track for us. I'll align them to 0 on my timeline. I'm going to remove the mixer window for the moment since we want to focus on the timeline edit area. Okay, now all our files are starting at 0. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set an end position in my timeline where I want all these files to end. I'm going to select all files and hit B. You can find your split shortcut checking the actions window by going to the menu actions and then show actions list. And in here, you can type split items. And as you see, my shortcut is B. You may have a different one, or you may want to add a new one by clicking add here and adding a shortcut. So all shortcuts are customizable in Reaper, and that's one great advantage of this piece of software. What I'm going to do now is select all these leftover items and delete them. Now I'm sure that all our files are the same length. Next, hit Shift and double click on one of the clips so that we have a selection, the same length as the file. And then I'm going to create a region marker, which in my case, I use Command Option G, but you can have a different one. This is Insert Region Marker. That's how you look it up. Here it is. If you have a different one, you can apply that one, or just go to Insert and Region from Time Selection right here. So you see there are now two regions here. Why do we want to have this region? Because later we want to edit this, and we also want to have it on our 0 point in our timeline. So now I can actually move. This has to do with how sound post-production works, where it's very vertical, and we tend to have a lot of tracks, maybe hundreds of tracks if we're working on a film, for example. So we want to make sure that when we move something on the timeline, everything moves together, and that's what we can do with this region marker. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to just render this footsteps for now. To do that, I'm going to go to my render window. I can hit File and Render right here, or say Command Option R, Control Alt R in the case of Windows, of course. And I'm presented with the render to file window. What we want in this case, we want to render all these items at one time. We don't want to go one by one. So instead of using the master mix, we're going to use selected media items via master. We want to make sure this is unselected, this 1 second of silence tail option, which is really not easy to understand why it's there in the first place. Next thing we want to do is want to check that the sample rate is the correct one. In this case, we don't have a standard for a project yet. This is something that you will need to sort out with the game developers, what's going to be the sample rate for the project. So for now, I'm going to just go ahead and use 44100. This is the one my system is running on right now. And I'm going to make sure that this is mono and not stereo. As you see, there's only one channel in this file. So now we have 10 items are selected. We're going to convert them into 10 files. We're going to browse for a directory here. Then we have to name these files. I'm going to name them footsteps_dirt. It's useful not to leave spaces in between, particularly when we're working with game engines. And I'm going to render 10 files. In fmod, I just have a new project. There's nothing in it. We have assets, which are going to be our files. We have banks that constitute sort of the bit of a database of attributes and behaviors that the engine will read in order to understand how to manipulate the sounds that have been edited in fmod. And then we have events that we will use to communicate between fmod and the server. So for now, let's create a new event. It's going to be a 2D timeline. Let's make sure that this loop button is selected, since we're going to need it in a moment. We are going to, you see this is unassigned. We're going to assign this to the master bank. Okay, now the master bank has one event assigned. Let's call this event footsteps, so it's a bit clearer. And now our master bank has clearly the event footsteps included in it. We're going to need to load our assets. And even though this is just a quick demonstration, I would like to make a bit of a hierarchy, sort of emulating what this would look like if we have a larger project where we have multiple assets and multiple sound effects and multiple characters. So we're going to have, we're going to make a new folder called character. This is general, our main character, and we're going to make a new folder in here. We're going to call this sound effects, since we could have other type of sound assets attached to our main character, for example, voices or voice gestures or foley. Inside the sound effects, we're going to make a new folder called footsteps. And inside footsteps, because this is only one particular type of footsteps that I exported, I'm going to make a new folder, footsteps, dirt. We can also use cap here. Okay, something like this. It's important that you understand later what you've been doing here, and that this is well communicated with the rest of the team. Remember, when you're working on a larger team, it's also important that things are clear for everybody else. Once we have the right folder where we're going to drop the files, I'm going to grab the files here and drop them. Make sure they are dropped inside of the folder. And now we can see all the assets are listed inside our fsdirt folder. I'm going to now go to the event and create a multi-instrument. And this multi-instrument is a container that will allow us to handle multiple files. I'm going to drop the 10 files in here. The default playback mode is shuffle, but you can change this to randomize, which means it will just jump random numbers without taking into consideration the that all index numbers are completed as a shuffle would do. Or you can play this sequentially. Once our container is created, I'm going to keep this in shuffle playlist mode. And I want to do two more things, which is add randomization by going to the add modulation menu and select random. And then I'm going to assign a value that's going to be the range of randomization we apply to the pitch offset when every time we play these files. So now, some files are playing lower and higher pitch. This is a little bit too much. You can hear some are a little bit too low, and therefore may sound like a different character. So you need to be careful with this. I'm going to keep it a little bit more narrow, and then I'm going to add also modulation random to the file start. Change this a little bit, and this will change the offset of how late the playback starts. So it's going to skip a little bit of the attack of the file every time. I can recommend to keep this short, particularly with transient sounds. So otherwise, if you start too late, you will hear nothing. Great. That's how you create randomization in multi-instrument in fmod using assets rendered in Reaper.